Welcome, guys, to How the Frack We Got Here, a show that takes the news and events of the week and try to make sense out of it all. I'm your host and most Will Buchanan, and on this show, we simply are all about the facts. There are plenty of news stations out there that simply want to do anything short but inform you. Here at How the Frack We Got Here, that's all we believe in. We go up to the left, we go up to the right, we go up to the middle of independence. We go after all sides because there's more than one side of a story to everything. And you need to know it all in order to actually formulate your own opinion. And that's what we try to do here at How the Frack We Got Here. Thanks for listening, and hold on. It's going to be fun. All right, guys. Today's date, July the 10th, 2024, and this is How the Frack We Got Here. I'm the host of most Will Buchanan on the Frack We Got Here. We do take the events of the week and try to make sense out of it all. Before we get started, guys, we do try to keep ourselves as legitimate news podcast, which means we only get news from the most reputable sources with award-winning journalism. We don't do sensational news like Fox News, News Media, Newsmax, The Daily Beast, where extreme left or extreme right that you get your news from. We simply do not do that. We give you nothing but the facts, just the facts. At the same time, guys, we do try to watch our language, but sometimes words do fly. At the same time, there may be things that might be shown that might be too intense for younger viewers. So viewer discretion is advised. Aside from that, welcome. So, unfortunately, I did, for a Wednesday, we do have to start with some somber news because how many more times are we going to keep seeing, and I mean this ever so succinctly, when you hear the story, it's going to sound very familiar, and so will the outcome.
To see them beat him repeatedly over and over and over again. They didn't stop. They could have stopped. They could have let him go, and they didn't.
Tonight in Wisconsin, a distraught wife demanding justice in the death of Devontae Mitchell after family says they viewed surveillance video from Milwaukee's Hyatt Regency Hotel that showed the 43-year-old husband and father running scared through the lobby on Sunday, June 30th, at one point ducking into a women's restroom before police say being detained by hotel security, leading to this moment.
Stay down! Please stop fighting! Please stay down!
Cell phone video recorded by a witness shows Mitchell, who family says may have been suffering from a mental health episode, crying out as he's held face down by four people identified by police as hotel security, one appearing to notice the witness. Milwaukee police saying Mitchell had fought with security guards who detained him until police arrived. They say officers found Mitchell unresponsive and he later died. Civil rights attorney Ben Crump says one of the men who held him down, a front desk employee, claims he told security guards Mitchell couldn't breathe, but was ordered to keep holding him.
To the district attorney, we don't know what else we need to present to you to bring charges.
10 days after Mitchell's death, the DA says they're awaiting full autopsy results and reviewing this case as a homicide. Meanwhile, Hyatt says the group who manages the hotel has suspended the employees involved. Lester.
Thanks for watching. Stay.
So how many times we're going to sit there and see the same thing? Black man gets chased. Black man gets held down. Black man suffocates and dies. We have to wait for the autopsy. Now, again, that man, as far as according to his family, they said that he may have had a mental episode. It amazes me that if he had a mental episode, that how security always seems to react with force. Because we keep on talking about mental health in this country. We keep on talking about how to recognize those with issues or those with problems or those going through something. The fact that you have mental health advocates actually riding with some law enforcement in some cities and states. And yet in a hotel where it seems the hotel security was more intent on stopping him, where I just keep asking the same question. There are four of you and one of him, and you're going to sit there and tell me that you cannot get this man to a sitting position? That's the thing I've never understood. If there's four, if you are literally overpowering this guy with four people, you're telling me four people can get one individual to a sitting position and restrain him that way to where, he can breathe? Because that always seems to be the go-to. Get the man on the ground, put your body weight on him, and that's how you subdue him. And again, it is just odd that seems that how many times have we heard that story at the same time the same outcome happens, and we're not. I won't say enraged, but we are. I don't want to get desensitized to it. I don't. And of course, that's going to develop because we're going to see the toxicology report. And trust me, that's the reason why Fox News is quiet right now. Fox News is waiting for the autopsy and toxicology report because they're going to do what happened with Eric Gardner, with George Floyd. They're going to try to sit there and say, "Oh, well, it wasn't the weight of the officers that was on top of him that killed him. It was the stuff in his system. That's what killed him." They're going to find any excuse, and I hate to say that. But the hotel at this moment is doing damage control. Hyatt is trying to distance themselves away from this, even if it means the hotel employees involved, who are currently suspended, may or may not get fired. We don't know that yet. But at the same time, yes, I don't blame the family for suing the hotel because they have to explain, number one, why they were chasing him. Number two, why such extreme measures, and number three, the excuse of, well, I was told to hold him down. Well, who told you to hold him down? Because if that's the case, someone else is liable. And if it's law enforcement, then if I was that family, everybody would be getting sued. But we're going to follow that case as it develops because, again, how many more times we keep hearing, I can't breathe, in a position to where those who have security training can't seem to get away from putting the body weight on somebody while on the ground, while on top of them, especially when you have other people that can help you restrain said person. I will never understand it. But like I said, we will follow that story as it goes along. So let's get to the Democrats. I know I usually start with the Republicans. We're going to start with the Democrats tonight because sometimes how can I put this over so nice with Democrats? You guys off the phone, first off, a lot of you are spineless, really are. But at the same time, there seems to be this story that just will not seem to go away. And it stemmed back from the first debate with Biden and convicted felon Trump. I love saying that. But however, it isn't the Republicans who are saying Joe is too old now. That 81-year-old President Joe Biden is too old to run for a second term. Nope. It's his own party. To where now they're calling, some of them, and it seems to be growing in number, are calling for him to step down. It amazes me, but unfortunately, it's true.
Dozens of world leaders at the NATO summit in Washington. President Biden is promoting unity and strength.
Today, we're stronger than we've ever been.
But that message comes as the president faces fresh calls to leave the race. Today, one of his most prominent Hollywood backers going off script. George Clooney, who hosted a star-studded fundraiser for the president just 3 weeks ago, writing a guest essay in the New York Times, arguing we are not going to win in November with this president, and urging Democrats to coalesce behind a new nominee. The actor making the case that the president he spent time with at the fundraiser had changed from prior elections. And that night was the same man we all witnessed at the debate. And this morning, former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi became the highest-ranking Democrat to signal he could still drop out.
It's up to the president to decide if he is going to run. We're all encouraging him to make that decision because time is running short.
A striking statement, considering the president has repeatedly said he has decided.
I'm staying in the race.
Pelosi later clarifying she still supports the president.
President Biden, is Nancy Pelosi still behind you, sir?
Still, top House Democrat Hakeem Jeffries has told worried lawmakers that he plans to relay their concerns to President Biden, 4 sources confirmed to NBC News. And senior Biden advisors are now set to brief Democratic senators at a special caucus luncheon tomorrow, after Michael Bennet of Colorado became the first sitting senator to say this publicly.
Donald Trump is on track, I think, to win this election and maybe win it by a landslide and take with him the Senate and the House.
The question now, will the floodgates open on Capitol Hill?
I am deeply concerned about Joe Biden winning this November. We have to reach a conclusion as soon as possible.
ABC's George Stephanopoulos apparently reaching his own conclusion, now acknowledging he should not have said this in a video posted on TMZ just days after interviewing the president.
What do you think? Do you think Biden should step down? You talk to him more than anybody else have lately, and you can be honest.
Tonight, the Biden campaign is promising more unscripted events to convince lawmakers, donors, and voters that the president is all in.
And Gabe, there's late word from Capitol Hill tonight about subpoenas regarding the president's health.
Yes, Lester, late today, the Republican-led House Oversight Committee said it had subpoenaed 3 senior White House aides, demanding they sit for depositions regarding the president's mental fitness. The White House is calling it a baseless political stunt.
So this is the problem I have. And I stress this very heavily, that some Democrats are trying to say that the current president, and I say this because I can't believe I'm saying it, but I guess I got to say it out loud. The current president who beat Donald Trump before he was a convict, before he was a felon, who beat him previously, this is the same guy who has, albeit, done a moderate job. And I say moderate because he did. I mean, it wasn't bad and it wasn't all the way good. It was a moderate job. But let's be honest, he's a moderate Democrat. That should go along territory. That being said, you're telling me this man that you think can't beat a convicted felon who has basically told everybody what he's going to do if he gets back in office, that he has sat there and said he wants to be a dictator. If he sat there and said he's gonna reverse, he's going to terminate certain government entities, he is going to end education and institute his own policy of education. This man, which I'll get to momentarily because he has this thing called Agenda 47, it's on his website, and we'll get into that momentarily. But that being said, you're telling me 81-year-old President Joe Biden can't beat him, and that all of these Democrats that are coming forward and calling for him to step down are all screaming it now. It's a little late. We are I believe 118 days away from election day. I think we're correct me if I'm wrong. I think we're 118 days away. If not, I'll go back and correct myself. But you guys waited 2 years too late, because again, Biden, and I said before in a previous podcast, everybody has an off night when it's debate night. Everybody has an off night. President Obama had an off night. When he was debating Mitt Romney, he had an off night. And again, you can give excuse you want to. Obama wasn't Obama that night when he debated Mitt Romney. Okay, fine. He came back. He still came back, still got a second term. No problem. Why would we not expect Biden to do the same thing? Especially since a guy like Trump. I don't mean to say it's like running against an idiot that believes his own hype, but yes, it's running against an idiot that believes his own hype. And it amazes me that these Democrats, although not all Democrats, because AOC and Bernie Sanders did support support Biden going forward, saying that he is fine. And he has already passed a physical fit test. Now, the only time I'll ever question a physical fit test was the one that was given to Trump that he said he was physically fit. That's the one I'll question, because that man's, let's be honest, that man's dietary planning, unless it's all McDonald's, let's be honest, not that healthy. But Democrats are shooting themselves in the foot. Instead of getting behind the president, really saying, as I've been saying this podcast, what these Democrats are not doing, they are not talking about all the accomplishments they've done this entire presidential first term. They have not talked about what they've been doing. They haven't talked about what they accomplished, what they got done. They haven't talked about any of those things. They're too busy for some of them talking about, well, Biden is a little old. Maybe we should get a different president. Maybe we should have a different candidate. And as a voter, I can't tell you how many times that it's almost like Democrats are like, you guys don't even get behind the same guy who's running the country right now. You're too busy trying to replace him because he's old. Where, no offense, a lot of you guys, if we're going by age, should be replaced. There's some seven there. Don't get me wrong. Representative Maxine Waters is older than President Biden, and she still gets shit done. Maxine Waters, remember that? Whoever, again, she's older than Joe Biden. She's still getting shit done. So as much as they want to sit there and talk about age, well, it's just how he talked. And I said, this is a man who is dyslexic, has a stutter. Why are you surprised? And still did a moderate job. But Democrats seem to be on this, well, we just might need to look into, a different candidate. Well, who? If we're going to go that route, who do you have? Because if Biden steps down, that means Madam Vice President Kamala Harris is next. And let's be honest, I'm trying to be as nice as I can, because Kamala Harris, again, made history as the first, history on a lot of counts. She is the first Black vice president. She is the first Black woman to be a vice president in a executive branch. She has made history. Do not get me wrong. Without her, we would not have Ketanji Brown Jackson as Supreme Court justice. She was the deciding factor in getting her nominated to Supreme Court. Again, she has done things, but at a moment to where she went to New Orleans during the Essence Festival to speak about it, she could have sat there, and I get mad when I see this, because like, you guys have the moment, and we need to hold ourselves and the people we vote for and accountable. And Madam Vice President basically came to the Essence Festival and didn't mention the president once. Didn't talk about, Joe's okay. He's fine. We'll be okay for a second term. That's all you had to freaking say. You didn't have to give this whole 4-hour speech on everything else. Oh, well, we have plans to do this in the year and this, did this, that, and the other. Say Joe's fine. Say what you accomplished. Say what needs to be done. And say that we need you to vote. How hard is that? And again, I'm not saying Madam Vice President Kamala Harris is not stupid. She is very educated. But it is amazing to me the current stand of the Democrats are not doing what Republicans always do. Republicans toe the line. They may be counterproductive. They may be hypocrites. They may be uber religious nuts. But when it comes to the party line, everybody toes it. And we'll get into that momentarily. But again, it amazes me that Democrats have taken a story that should have been old and gone, and yet still gains traction because some people believe that Joe should step down. But you can't provide another candidate that could do so. So again, make it make sense. But speaking of things to make it make sense, again, another we're actually going to show a traffic stop where it occurred in Delaware, where it seems the officers may have gotten just a little bit too handsy and punched a woman for what it looks like to be no reason. Again, this is graphic. Viewer discretion is advised.
New video tonight from Newcastle County Police showing a controversial incident between officers and a driver. Police released body cam video today showing the encounter. It was back on June 29th when it happened, saying they're aware of video circulating online. They say one of its officers saw the driver commit several traffic violations, and when he tried to pull her over, she kept going, pulling into the parking lot of a Royal Farms on Pulaski Highway and then backing into a parking spot.
Step out of the car. Step out. Step out. Because I asked you to. Yes. For what? Step out. What? You want to get locked up? For what? Right now, you're resisting. For what? You said I'm detained, but you never gave me a reason. You pulled me over, then you honked your sideline because I'm backing up. Did you want me to stop on this other road? No, we're not doing that.
We blurred her face because police have not released any information on her identity or charges filed. Police say the car's registration was suspended without insurance, and there was an old bullet hole on the driver's side door. According to police, the driver refused to get out of the car and asked for a supervisor. Then after about 3 minutes, several other officers arrive at the scene.
I stated to you, I'm going to wait till your friends come. Don't touch me, and I'll get out.
Get out of the car. Get out of the car. I'm not.
Move.
Put your hands behind your back.
That's when the driver gets out of the car. There's a little scuffle here, and you hear officers tell her to get to the ground, stop resisting, and to get off of an officer's foot. At one point, it appears an officer hits her. She's eventually handcuffed and placed in a police car. Now, we reached out to Newcastle County Police for more information on this incident, but at this time, they say they're not releasing her name or any charges. The department is investigating whether the officer's actions were within policy, and the incident has been referred to the Delaware Department of Justice.
Okay, so it's getting referred to to Delaware Department of Justice. Try saying that 5 times fast. I got a question. What did she do to where the officer decided to give her the Marge Simpson just a again? And then he says, "Well, she stepped on the officer's foot." Doesn't mean the officer has the green light to punch a woman. I'm just saying. But again, I talked about law enforcement. I talked about there needs to be reform to it. We keep saying there needs to be reform, and we keep being told, well, there's just a few bad apples. And I'll keep saying this the same way Chris Rock said it. In some jobs, you cannot have okay or terrible people working those jobs. Law enforcement is one of them. We can't have bad apples. If you can't control yourself when you were not assaulted, when you had more numbers than said person, and decided still to punch them on the way down while they're being restrained, I don't think you should be a law enforcement officer. I personally think you need to have your job taken away from you. I think that your pension needs to go to the victims. Because let's be honest, the only thing that ever actually changes in police brutality toward minorities is money. And I keep saying this, I'll say it again. Take the police pension fund and use that as cash payments toward victims that they harm. Watch how quickly those actual attacks and things of that nature will drop. Why? Because you attack the money. Sometimes it takes that much. But again, guys, like I said, I know I got off the Democrats. The simple fact of the matter is they can't get behind Joe because they're too busy trying to install another candidate, which I think is a little too late for that. But let's talk about Trump for a second, because again, if you've been on the interwebs, you probably outside have heard of They Not Like Us and Hawk Tool Girl. You probably heard the words Project 2025. And yes, it does involve Trump, but not the way you think.
Former President Donald Trump in a new post online insisting he knows nothing about Project 2025 with no idea who's behind it, calling some of the controversial 900-page proposal to overhaul the federal government ridiculous and abysmal. The comments coming after Democrats pushed to tie Mr. Trump to the plan, created not by the Trump campaign itself, but by some former Trump administration officials working with conservative think tank, the Heritage Foundation. Its president coming under fire just last week for this.
We are in the process of the Second American Revolution, which will remain bloodless if the left allows it to be.
So what is Project 2025?
What we're doing is systematically preparing to march into office and bring a new army of aligned, trained, and essentially weaponized conservatives ready to do battle against the deep state.
That battle plan outlining several key proposals, including a federal government under much tighter presidential control. Even now, independent agencies like the Department of Justice would answer almost entirely to Mr. Trump. And it calls for replacing thousands of civil employees with political appointees, presumably loyal to the former president. Project 2025 calls for more spending for a U.S.-Mexico border wall, a signature Trump proposal back in 2016.
Build that wall.
And on this side of the border, big cuts to corporate taxes and income tax for America's highest earners. The plan taking aim at what it calls woke culture warriors, calling for deleting a long list of terms from all federal rules, including sexual orientation, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and gender identity, and eliminating the education department. It's not uncommon for think tanks to create wish lists for governments in waiting. But with the race for the White House all but deadlocked, Democratic opposition to the plan has ramped up against what Congressman Jared Huffman, behind the Stop Project 2025 task force, calls a dystopian plot.
I think what troubles me the most is just the explicitness of the extremism. And the people who are saying these things are the most inner circle leaders of Donald Trump's political world.
Those behind Project 2025 accuse Democrats of fear-mongering.
This really would tee up an incoming administration to achieve more than we've ever seen under a conservative president before.
Now, a spokesperson for Project 2025 says in a post on X that the group does not speak for any candidate or campaign. And in response to those controversial comments on an American revolution, the head of the Heritage Foundation tells the New York Times, quote, "These patriots are committed to peaceful revolution at the ballot box." Now, President Biden, for his part, in a statement, says Project 2025 would give Mr. Trump limitless power over.
Okay, so again, you said Project 2025. Now, of course, Trump has said, I've got nothing to do with it because I have my own agenda. And yes, for a split second, guys, we are going to go to the website because he has Agenda 47. As you can see right there, with our convicted felon Trump, of course, Agent 47. I'm sorry, Agenda 47, not to be confused with Hitman 47, Hitman, but you can see, and I'm just going to just go over a couple of these just so you guys know. This is what he says as he would do if he was reelected for his second go around. He'll declare war on all cartels, which again, because apparently the war on drugs is still going on. Ending veteran homelessness in America. Although he says here, President Trump will make it a personal mission to totally eradicate veterans' homelessness in America, but doesn't say how he's going to do it. However, we have already seen the previous podcast where the Supreme Court has sat there and told cities and states that do have laws and bans in place for homelessness that, hey, you guys are okay to proceed how you want to because there is nothing that prevents you from enforcing this, so go nuts. I love to see how Trump's going to do that. But again, I don't want to play this video. It's pretty much full of bullshit. No welfare for illegal aliens, which is amazing to me because that is a talking point that Fox News loves to point out, that these illegal aliens somehow are getting more welfare than common citizens. Although he will say he will end it. Well, no offense. Welfare is actually through the governmental system. So how are illegal aliens getting it? The American Academy. This is the part I want to talk to you guys for a second. That he has said. Now, note the wording on this. President Trump announces a plan to revolutionize higher education by shifting excessively large endowments from private universities toward a new institution called the American Academy. What President Trump is not saying that if he did actually come into office, that he would dismantle the Department of Education because he believes what is currently happening right now is indoctrination. He wants to do the American Academy to where they can introduce their own patriotic history. And we can keep going down the line, guys. I can go down the fact that he wants to really push for homeschooling, that he wants to, tell the American workers that, you're getting ripped off by Joe Biden, which is not true because American auto workers have actually, through unions, have actually gotten more pay and more benefits because of the strikes. And I can keep going down the line, guys. But if you think about this, his Agenda 47 is nothing more than Project 2025 light. And the fact, again, if you want to look at it, because Project 2025 is 900 pages. Agenda 47 is maybe a quarter of that. And yet, when it comes to Trump, and I say it before, Democrats should have a slam dunk. It should be so easy for them to go to the voters and say, do you really want that guy running with everything that he wants to do? Even more so that, again, I don't understand Democrats because you had this happen that the House Democrats and Senate Democrats tried to codify Roe versus Wade to basically protect abortion rights for women. This was blocked in the Senate by Republicans by a vote of 49 to 44. 49 to 44. And if you're wondering, all Republicans voted against this. All Senate Republicans voted against this. That alone should tell you everything you want to know. And again, this is this whole thing I keep talking about where this should be a slam dunk for Democrats. This should be your campaign. Republicans don't like women. Republicans think of women as basically as broodmares, as breeders, that they hate abortion, that they'll sit there and cry about the unborn child, that they'll go after education, that they'll do all these things. And yet Democrats this is why I call them spineless. It's like, why are you guys not calling out the BS from the other side at the same time, explaining everything that you've done and that we could have got A, B, and C if it wasn't for them? I don't understand it. I do not understand the quietness of the Democrats when you are literally doing the Republicans' work for them. It's almost as if you're basically the same party, just different colors. But again, I digress. You guys tell me differently because it's good. I mean, granted, I hope people do vote in November. I hope everybody votes. That's my hope. But at the same time, your choices are a convicted felon who has done nothing for the American people but helped himself and rich people and corporations versus a man who, yes, he is old, but so is most of Congress. Congress at this point is a nursing home, given the ages of people there. But yes, he did a moderate job, but he didn't, didn't do what Trump did, because I always point out what Trump did. He's the only man in the world that is a successful businessman who bankrupted a casino. That's unheard of. But again, I digress. But here's another reason why Trump is smiling, because guys that keep talking about this, and I'm afraid this is happening, that all these cases to where that can prevent Trump becoming president are either getting halted or postponed or things of that nature, especially with the fact that the Supreme Court handed him that win earlier last week. And now the judge who's over the documents case is basically giving Trump a pass.
News out of Florida, Judge Cannon saying, I'm going to agree with you, Donald Trump, and temporarily stay some important deadlines. Your thoughts?
You know, Katie, so much to dislike, both in form and in substance about this one. And I think what I want to start with is just two short lines from the motion that Donald Trump's lawyer filed yesterday. So we'll talk about just how quickly Judge Cannon acted when her action was going to be to the benefit of Donald Trump. Here's what they say in the opening paragraphs of yesterday's court filing. Quote, President Biden's exceedingly weak debate performance on June 27. Quote, President Biden's failing attempt to communicate with the voters, close quote. Katie, I was a federal prosecutor for 30 years. I've never seen language like that in a court filing from a defense attorney or a prosecutor. And any self-respecting judge would consider ordering it stricken from the motion and then issuing a show cause order, directing the attorney who authored it to show cause why they shouldn't be sanctioned for turning a court filing into a campaign ad. That's the first observation. The second is think back to May when Jack Smith, special counsel, filed a motion asking Judge Cannon to modify Donald Trump's conditions of release to stop him from saying and posting things that were endangering law enforcement. She has yet to act on that. And yet within 24 hours of Donald Trump's attorneys asking her to do something, she couldn't jump on it quickly enough and entered an order, basically taking a train that was already stopped dead in its tracks and putting it in reverse. So she's moving away from a trial date rather than toward a trial date.
I was envisioning, Glenn, her putting like a boot on the wheels of that train. Ian, I want to talk to you and stay on Judge Cannon, but in a peripheral way, kind of.
So again, that's what people are worried about, that now it's been pushed back. And at the same time, it's weird, it's scary, it's how is he getting all of this done? Because this is a guy who sat there and said, well, we'll take our case to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court doesn't hear a lot of cases, and yet his cases got heard. Judges he appointed are over his judges that he appointed through his administration are now presiding over his cases. You can't make this up where people will sit there and go, wait a minute, this is a Trump appointed judge? Oh, I don't know. Because I said the same thing. I don't know. Will this judge actually be a judge and not, have any type of loyalty toward Trump? It's kind of hard to say, because this woman who is over one of the cases where, again, if convicted, he couldn't run for office because then he'll be branded a traitor for harboring documents he's not supposed to have for clearance that he thought he could undo because, he didn't read the Constitution. But that case is going to get postponed. It's almost as if they want to put everything on the back burner to allow this man to run. And all I can sit there and say is this is just going to put his cult. It's going to put his people saying, this is why he wins. They don't want to be president. Now look, everything's going the way he wants to. MAGA 2025, people. Yeah, I've heard MAGA 2025, and I know, don't tell them, but that's what they'll say. And at the same time, it is hard to argue with it. Because who at this point, when are we going to finally sit there and say it? We can say it all the time that supposedly nobody's above the law, not even the president. But yet a former president, now convicted felon, is getting presidential preference, if you will. And yet we're all, the rest of the citizens are like, how is it that this man gets a pass when anybody else in his situation would be under the jail by now? I mean, that's what everybody's looking at. And even more so, I'll even get to Nikki Haley. That's not her real name. Has turned around because, and again, I'm going to get into this. She released her delegates because the RNC next week will be going through a confirmation to where, let's be honest, Dorito will get the Republican nomination. That being said, she actually had delegates actually vote for her to where now she released them so they can vote for Trump. Now, keep in mind, this is the Nikki Haley, that's not her real name, has sat there and said Trump cannot be president. Trump isn't capable, that, we cannot depend on him to get the White House. And of course, because she's a woman in the GOP, I always laugh. I laugh because, again, for the conservatives out there, if you think, and I mean this all sincerity, if you think a woman or a person of color in an all-white party will ever be nominated for any type of presidential or vice presidential seat and win, you are about as delusional as the My Pillow guy that thinks that he is still relevant. Because Tim Scott believed it, Nikki Haley believed it, and where are they now? Tim Scott is still trying to hope to God he can be the singing Sambo / Uncle Tom for President Trump, and Nikki Haley wants nothing to do with it because Trump will not consider her for vice president, and her swing at trying to become a presidential candidate has ended. So she's going to fade off to whatever side of Fox News or The Blaze or the Daily Beast will have her. So yes, she released her 97 delegates to where now they will vote for Trump. So this is what I was getting to, guys, about the simple fact of the matter that say what you want about Republicans sometimes, but when it comes time to toe the party line, they do it effortlessly. Even though Nikki Haley says, well, we need to get behind President Trump. Didn't just a couple of months ago you said this man can't be trusted? She's towing the party line. But I don't expect those in Fox News or those in certain GOP circles to sit there and hold her accountable because, hey, she's playing ball. Because if she plays ball, the money keeps rolling for her. Again, tell me you never heard of a broke politician in Congress. But moving right along, guys, I wanted to cover this story as well as far as education goes before we get to our business and then on to our feel-good segment. Virginia is joining other states that are trying to restrict cell phone in schools, saying that this has a detrimental mental health effect on students and the fact that it gets in the way of their education. No, because education is already fracked up. Education has been taken over by parents who question what is being taught their kids. Education funding has been cut in half or even worse every year to where schools have to do less. Teachers are not getting paid more. Schools are getting overcrowded. The actual teaching, I should say the actual educational system that's actually being used in most school systems is woefully outdated unless you go to a private school in which they seem to get their best of everything because, hey, tuition, I should know. I freaking pay it one. Ugh. But anyway, it amazes me so that we look at this. And of course, children, well, we need to have cell phones. Have you not seen school shootings? I want to know if my child is okay. I can't knock that. Considering the fact that we've done nothing about gun violence and that, folks who are not criminals, folks who can still get things regardless of the current standards and practices that we have for buying firearms can still get them. even though if we instituted instituted new limitations and procedures, they wouldn't get that. But because that violence still occurs, and at the same time, students are wearing bulletproof backpacks or clear backpacks, lockdown procedures are getting put in place, yes, I can't argue the fact that kids should have cell phones, because you need to be able to, parents want to get in touch with their kids when danger happens to know that they're okay. It's just a fact of life. That's what's supposed to happen. But here's another thing that I wish that honestly schools need to really diverge into, because kids love cell phones and tablets, technology. This happens, right? Why are we not adapting our educational system to this? See, my thing is, we should be actually embracing technology. We should actually be using it to an extent to where we can revamp our education system and reach these kids differently, especially with these kids that have different learning types or disabilities or things of that nature. Why are we not utilizing that? Utilizing smartphones, utilizing tablets, because other countries are doing it. And I'm honestly trying to figure that out, because we're too busy trying to go back to the 1940s educational system while locking out technology because they see it as a distraction, when really we should be using it as a way to incorporate that and actually improve education across the board. Because let's be honest, if education had the same blank checkbook as the Department of Defense, there'd be smarter people and fewer wars. That's all I'm saying. But moving right along, guys, I want to cover this because Boeing, we talked about Boeing a lot, especially at the fact that, whistleblowers seem to come up missing. Well, Boeing as a company has settled again.
Today's guilty plea comes more than 5 years after 346 people died in 2 Boeing MAX 8 crashes overseas. Boeing now admits it's committed a felony, misleading FAA regulators about new cockpit software that eventually brought both planes down. Family attorneys say the plea isn't enough.
Victim families feel like Boeing is getting off easy.
Under the plea agreement, Boeing must pay another $244 million fine, bringing the total to $487 million, and spend $455 million to strengthen compliance and safety programs. An independent monitor will oversee Boeing's compliance. Boeing avoided prosecution in 2021 by agreeing to improve quality control and report truthfully to the FAA. But after the mid-air door plug blowout in January, prosecutors accused Boeing of violating that agreement. Today, Boeing said we have reached an agreement in principle on terms of a resolution with the Justice Department. CEO Dave Calhoun on Capitol Hill last month.
We have tried to look at literally everything we do to make certain that that can never happen again.
Nadia Milaron lost her 24-year-old daughter, Samia, in the Ethiopian crash.
We have a perpetrator that killed 346 people, and they have to be accountable for those deaths.
Complicating the plea, companies convicted of felonies can be barred from defense contracts. But Boeing is a critical defense and space contractor and could require a waiver. A Texas judge will decide whether to accept or reject the deal.
And Tom, while we have you, we're learning of another plane that lost a tire on takeoff today.
So again, with Boeing, this isn't the first time they've done this. The fact that taking a plea deal means that there is some admission of guilt, and that, and this is the part that bothers me, because yes, Boeing does have military contracts with the U.S. At the same time, it's like, okay, we'll do this plea deal, we'll pay this fine, and all's forgiven, right? And people are going, no, because Boeing has had a history of issues with their planes, issues with their engines, as we just showed a few months ago, where literally the door came off a Boeing plane. And thankfully, nobody was sitting right there, because when that door did come off, whoever was sitting right next to that door is getting sucked out. But what's so crazy about this is that what the journalist said at the end, that because Boeing, because if they did get convicted, they're barred from defense contracts. Boeing has multiple defense contracts with the U.S. government. So now I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. The same thing that usually happens because they've got too many irons in the fire and no one else, and they can't get rid of him. So you know what's going to happen? Boeing, the judge is going to accept it. He may up the amount. Boeing's almost nearly $1 trillion company. They'll pay whatever amount it is. The CEO at the time will probably get a golden parachute on his way out. A new CEO will be installed, and business as usual. And there's something wrong with that. That how is it that a company who has had multiple negligence is still allowed to operate in the US at a high number, all because they paid a fine? How is it that we have not figured out what other countries have done? They have jailed politicians, CEOs, and bankers. We give them a pass. If it was anybody else, they'd be in jail. Even more so with Fifth Third Bank. Fifth Third Bank, again, and I can't make this up because I thought it was Wells Fargo that did identity theft, but no, Fifth Third Bank basically forced their customers into car insurance, even to the point to where they repossessed vehicles and was doing this illegally. And now that they were caught, they're agreeing to pay up to $20 million in penalties. Imagine, if you will, a bank that was selling car insurance. And let's be honest, we all need car insurance. You see how people drive on the roads these days. But this bank was selling car insurance. No different than any other bank credit union. They all sell discounted car insurance. But instead of taking no for an answer, Fifth Third Bank forced their customers to actually get it, even creating fake accounts for those that, again, decided not to. So let me get this straight. So this bank decided to force people into buying this car insurance. And if you didn't do it, you still bought it, you still paid for it anyway. That also being said, that's identity theft, that's extortion. And yet, from a lawsuit that was almost 4 years ago, this was back in 2022 when the lawsuit was filed, that they're now agreeing to pay $20 million and a final payout. But will anybody go to jail? Probably not. CEO will probably step down, gets a golden parachute. Another CEO gets installed in. Fifth Third Bank is allowed to operate as usual. Because thankfully, the Consumer Federal Protection Department, Consumer Federal Protection Bureau, or the CFPB, which has actually been doing great work, is the ones behind this. Now, imagine if we didn't have an agency that was like that wasn't monitoring and holding business accountable. You would have companies like Boeing and banks like Fifth Third Bank still operating, even though the penalties are drops in the bucket. They really are. Those penalties really are drops in the bucket. Those CEOs will be fine, but those companies are still allowed to run, and it's only because that one is a bank and one has contracts with the U.S. government. All I can sit there and say is, when are we ever going to hold companies accountable for gross negligence, identity theft, the same things that normal people would be under the jail for, that these companies are still allowed to own and operate and proceed as normal? That's what I would like to know. But unfortunately, that's the way it is until somebody in Congress decides to do something. I'm looking at the voters. We can make that happen. But the last word I got, guys, it's actually a very nice one. AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, has done something for the Supreme Court that really should be done. But even though this is a symbol of gesture, if you will, it doesn't mean it's not possible.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to introduce articles of impeachment against Associate Justices of the Supreme Court, Clarence Thomas and Samuel Anthony Alito, Jr. Against Justice Thomas, the resolution includes 3 total articles: 1 count of failure to disclose financial income, gifts, reimbursements, property interest liabilities, and transactions, among other information, and 2 counts of refusal to recuse from matters concerning his spouse's legal and financial interests before the court. The second resolution includes the following impeachment articles against Justice Alito: 1 count of refusal to recuse from cases in which he had a personal bias or prejudice concerning a party before the court, and 1 count of failure to disclose financial incomes, gifts, reimbursements, property interests, among other information. Mr. Speaker, nomination and appointment to the Supreme Court is one of the highest privileges and most consequential responsibilities of our nation. Such an appointment is uniquely insulated in its power. Confirmation to the court is a lifetime appointment whereby justices are entrusted with decisions that powerfully shape the nation as well as the lives of every American. For this reason and others, the Constitution rightfully and explicitly holds justices to even higher standards than members of Congress or even the president. Section 1 of Article 3 of the Constitution commands federal justices to hold their offices during good behavior, in addition to its clauses barring treason, bribery, and other high crimes and misdemeanors. And Congress has exercised its power to reinforce this higher standard of the judiciary before. This body has impeached and removed 8 federal judges for transgressions ranging from evading income tax and perjury to intoxication on the bench and abandoning the office to join the Confederacy. Perhaps most critical to the legitimacy of the institution, these judicial standards require justices to recuse themselves in any proceeding where their impartiality might reasonably be questioned. In other words, if a person could reasonably believe that the legitimacy of a justice's judgment could be or be perceived to be compromised due to their personal involvement in the case or its parties, the standard is clear. The justice must recuse. They are required to recuse. That stringent and sacred standard exists for the good of the ruling, the judiciary, and the country. Mr. Speaker, I believe that everyday Americans, independent of party or ideology, can reasonably conclude that Justices Thomas and Alito's years-long pattern of misconduct and failure to recuse in cases bearing their clear personal and financial involvement represents an abuse of power and threat to our democracy fundamentally incompatible with continued service on our nation's highest court. For the good of the institution and the nation, absent resignation, they must be removed. The proof is undeniable, and here I will lay it out. Justice Clarence Thomas, for decades now, has carried on a close, financially entangled personal relationship with real estate billionaire Harlan Crow. It is of material importance to the American people to note that Justice Thomas's relationship to the billionaire only began after Thomas's powerful appointment to our nation's highest court. The cash, goods, and services Justice Thomas received over the years include large loan balance cancellations, tuition payments for family, and vacations in private jets and yachts worth up to $500,000 alone. In total, Justice Thomas appears to have received more than $1.5 million worth in goods, cash equivalents, and services from Mr. Crow. And that is just what we know of. But truthfully, we won't ever really know the total sum of contributions Thomas received from Crow. Justice Thomas not only accepted these contributions while Mr. Crow had business in front of the court, but he accepted them in secret, failing for years and years to report them. Yet Thomas did report smaller gifts during this time, demonstrating a clear understanding of his legal obligation to report. Would a reasonable American question that receiving lavish gifts from Mr. Crow might lead Justice Thomas to have a bias towards his, quote, friend with business before the court? Without a doubt, yes. But did Justice Thomas recuse? No. Now take Justice Samuel Alito, who has no shortage of billionaire associates of his own. After billionaire Paul Singer gave Justice Alito a luxury fishing trip on a private jet, a contribution that was also hidden from the public and the court, Justice Alito not only refused to recuse, but changed his mind regarding his gracious host's case. Just a short time after accepting the lavish undisclosed trip from Singer, Alito joined the court in reversing its previous position and took up Singer's case. He did not recuse. Justice Alito also refused to recuse in the case itself, ultimately leading to a ruling that netted Singer $2.4 billion. And that ruling did not just enrich Singer. It also structurally tilted the playing field further away from working people and towards the vulture funds, siphoning money and resources away from the communities that need them most. Could a reasonable American question whether or not Justice Alito could have acted impartially in this case, given his personal relationship with Singer? Absolutely. In January 2021, after the former president of the United States incited an insurrection on the Capitol in this chamber to interfere with the results of the US election, Justice Samuel Alito and his wife flew an upside-down American flag, a symbol of solidarity with the attack, outside their home. 2 years later, they publicly displayed outside their home yet another incendiary symbol, a flag associated with extreme right-wing Christian nationalism. Justice Alito maintains that his wife, Martha Ann Alito, is the only one responsible for the flags. But common sense maintains that such a close and incendiary revelation requires recusal by the justice from January 6 related cases. Despite the overwhelming appearance of a conflict of interest, Justice Alito refused to recuse himself from cases surrounding the 2020 election and questions of the former president's legal immunity in the attack. Would a reasonable person question that Justice Alito's conduct exhibits and demonstrates reasonable concern for bias in these cases? Absolutely, and without question. And finally, Justice Thomas, who is married to Virginia Thomas, a financially and personally involved operative in the Stop the Steal movement and Capitol attack, also joined opinions in these cases, even as clear evidence mounted that not only was his wife fully committed to overthrowing the results of a fair election, but she was actively lobbying members of the Trump administration attempting to do just that. The questions before the court had unquestionable implications for Thomas's wife and consequently Thomas himself, making his refusal to recuse one of the most shocking examples of conflict of interest in the court's history. And crucially, it was both Justices Thomas and Alito who cast critical votes in the ruling. It now follows that because of Alito's and Thomas's refusals to recuse, everyday Americans cannot, should not, and will not believe that these justices, and consequently the court they serve, is working to uphold the Constitution and put the country ahead of their own individual self-interests. Americans will not believe that the court interpreted the law independent of profit for themselves and their newly termed friends. Without action against these blatant violations, reasonable Americans have and will continue to lose faith in the court itself. Reasonable Americans will and do believe that Justices Thomas and Alito are prone and subject to corruption, that the institution failing to punish them is broken, and that consequently their impeachment is a constitutional imperative and our congressional duty. The abuses of power committed by Justice Thomas and Justice Alito are precisely the types of corruption that the framers understood was an existential threat to our democracy. Instances like these and misconduct like that of Alito's and Thomas's are precisely why the framers gave us the tool of impeachment. Corruption without consequence infects all it touches. And that is why this body, Congress, has a constitutional and moral obligation to hold these justices accountable, to maintain the integrity of our courts, and to uphold the standards of the judiciary and our institutions. Lastly, we cannot ignore the most important material consequences of this court's unchecked corruption and its resulting influence: the suffering of the American people. We cannot ignore and pretend that this corruption is wholly unrelated to the millions of pregnant Americans now suffering and bleeding out in emergency rooms under the court's unleashing of extreme abortion bans across the United States, which was a key political priority of these undisclosed benefactors and shadow organizations surrounding Alito and Thomas's misconduct. Nor can we ignore the millions of Americans now suffering hours-long wait times in the hot sun, often without water, just to cast a ballot, also a direct result of this corrupt court's gutting of the Voting Rights Act, allowing the closing of polling sites across the country. You see, neither these justices nor their shadowy benefactors have to answer to the parents of developmentally delayed children about their decision to gut the power of the EPA and the entire administrative state with it. But they do have to answer to us, the Congress, whom these people, the American people, have elected and entrusted to protect them, to serve them, and to defend the well-being of our democracy. Mr. Speaker, I am here today presenting these articles of impeachment not because I am a Democrat and not because I am blind to its odds in a Republican-led chamber. I present them because it is the right thing to do. And while our framers perhaps may not have envisioned someone like me in this seat, they absolutely did envision the necessity and value of the impeachment action upon which I seek to advance today.
And yeah, that's the reason why I let it run, because AOC did bring forth articles of impeachment against Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito, Supreme Court justices. Now you're probably wondering, how does that work? Well, same as if impeaching the president. That in order for this to happen, that there needs to be a 2/3 majority vote. If there was one, yeah, that justice be removed. Now, she has said it herself. It is a gesture in itself. She does not expect her Republican colleagues to sit there and go, yeah, we do need Supreme Court justices that aren't easily purchased, or, don't violate ethical lines, or don't have wives that will use their husband's seat of power to their own benefit. Maybe we do require those things, or would like to have those types of score, or basically, dare I say, a Supreme Court that does have an ethical board that it answers to. Now, again, she's not delusional. Yeah, it feels like this is a little too late. Well, I mean, to a point, it is, Kira. It really is to a point, just because, well, one, Republicans are not going to go against the grain. Republicans are definitely not ever going to impeach a conservative Supreme Court judge. That'll never freaking happen. At the same time, it's a symbol of gesture, because we kept saying the entire time, guys, that, especially if you've been watching this podcast, we have been sitting there saying that there's something wrong with the Supreme Court. Outside the fact that 2 Supreme Court justices got rushed through the process, Brett Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett got rushed through, basically making it a conservative-leaning Supreme Court. The fact that the conservative Supreme Court has shot down Roe versus Wade, the fact that the conservative Supreme Court has shot down a part of the affirmative action that actually include college entrances, which was brought forth by 4 Asian students that felt like Harvard was shunning them. Those 4 Asian students still didn't get in. Thank you for that, because that led to the destruction of DEI programs as well as roles in businesses because companies are going, hey, we can get rid of our DEI programs and not get sued. So thanks to those 4 Asian students. Really appreciate that. Let's not also forget, just last week, they talked about the Chevron doctrine, which meant that any government agency now has lost the legal power in a court case they bring forward. So let's not forget that the EPA, that the Department of Education, that even the DOJ may have some issues trying to get certain cases through because now they're not seen as the authority anymore. Again, Supreme Court has also sat there and said that they said that cities and states that have laws and regulations about homelessness that can now be allowed to operate because, again, they don't see it as unconstitutional. They've also sat there and said the president cannot forgive student loan debt, saying that he does not have the power to do so. But at the same time, they also said that the president can now be immune from some official acts. All the makings of a conservative Supreme Court. And I keep saying that as long as there's not a balanced Supreme Court. Now, don't get me wrong. Would I love a progressive liberal Supreme Court? Absolutely, because then that makes more sense. But let's be honest, it's not a perfect world. We're not going to get that. So what's left? A balanced Supreme Court. Biden could use the time that he has left, and he could balance out the Supreme Court. You could, because you do have reconciliation in the Senate. You still have Madam Vice President Kamala Harris's tiebreaker. You could push forward some confirmations that you have for Supreme Court and do the same thing that convicted felon Trump did when he had the Senate and he was the president. You could bum rush those people through, and you could make this conservative leaning Supreme Court a balanced one. You could. Will he? Probably not. At the same time, articles of impeachment brought against the Supreme Court is not uncommon. This has been done before. However, it wasn't gone through, and it probably won't go through this time because, again, Republicans have to protect their cash cow, meaning Trump and the cult that follows him. But it's a nice gesture, and to point out the facts, because Supreme Court judges do need to have an ethical board to basically answer to. We can't do the whole trust me because you're a Supreme Court justice. Because you're a justice doesn't mean that you're not infallible. You're human. You will succumb or make mistakes. That is the reason why we have checks and balances, or supposed to, in this country. But we're going to go ahead and move on to our feel-good segment, guys, because usually on How the Frack We Got Here, we do cover a lot of things that are doom and gloom, sometimes make you faith in humanity. But hey, it's hump day, leading toward tomorrow, which is Friday, which is Thursday. We'll leave you guys on some good vibrations, and hopefully we can do just that with this story. Imagine that you graduated law school, but never got your cap and gown, never got to walk that aisle, never really got to relish in your accomplishment. Well, the woman that we're about to show never got that chance, but thanks to some family members, she is.
This is the best thing ever. When I opened the box and I saw the tam, the doctoral tam, and then when I pulled out the robe and the hood and it was the colors of my university where I graduated from law school, then I knew what it was. And I was just so surprised because, first of all, I didn't expect it at all.
Her and I did a photo shoot together and commemorated the fact that we have 2 lawyers in the family, which is, I think, extraordinary in any instance.
I was in a real bad car accident that last semester of my 3rd year of law school. And as a result of that, I ended up failing a class. But the policy at that time at George Washington was if you had any credits pending, you weren't able to participate in graduation. So I never saw the cap and gown, and never wore it or anything. And it was a real disappointment to me at the time. I did finish law school. I passed the bar exam. And I went on to practice law for some years before I switched into the nonprofit sector.
I ordered her cap and gown from her school, and then I scheduled our hair appointments and our makeup appointments and our photo shoot. Having the fact that we're both Black women, it's extremely rare to have this sort of occurrence. So I wanted to celebrate it.
One of the things I hope maybe people will take from this is that no matter what, whatever adversity comes, you fall down, but you can get up.
I just thought that was cool because, again, if you never graduated, if you ever had the idea of graduating, and again, in her case, because of a stupid rule at school that kept her from graduating, that, you know, her daughter, who was also a lawyer, decided that, you know what, we're going to give you the one thing that you should have gotten a long time ago. And again, still cool to see that, because like I said, we do need more Black women lawyers, especially for guys like me that need to always keep bail money. But anyway, that being said, that's going to end it for this podcast. Thank you all for watching, for liking, for letting people know this is live. I certainly appreciate that. Some shameless plugging before we do get out of here, guys. I do also want to say to myself, again, for all those that are going to be in the Washington, D.C. area, BlurredCon, because a few of my compadres will be there. So definitely, if you're going to be in the area this weekend, definitely check it out. If you've never been to a con, please do so, especially a Blurred being a Black nerd or Black convention. The support is needed, and it's such an experience that I can only describe as a homecoming with cosplay and comics and artists and things of that nature. So again, if you are going to be in the Washington, D.C. area, guys, definitely check out BlurredCon as it's happening this weekend. You will not be disappointed. Also, if you see folks there like a Lady Mandalore or Chris Fury or Tafari TV or Mayhem Media, trust me, you won't miss them because they're part of the Blurred's Eye crew. Definitely check them out. I myself, unfortunately, won't be there because, hopefully I'll have a new edition coming who's coming sooner than later. But anyway, but yeah, definitely check them out. Also, check out blurredstation.com. I cannot stress this enough, guys, about blurredstation.com. It is the vehicle. It is the table we've always wanted. It's $10.99 a month. You can definitely join there. Again, if you're going to join, please join in the Blurred's Eye View Affinity membership. Select any member there. We certainly appreciate that. And it's $10.99 a month to view Blurred Station streaming movies, television, anime series. You name it, it's there. Definitely check it out. After 36 months of paying $10.99 a month, guys, you do have the option of owning a piece of Blurred Station. So definitely check it out. And if you also are a content creator and you want your content to be shown on blurredstation.com, first you have to join, which allows you to talk to people behind the curtain. And from there, if all works out, you'll be able to see your content on blurredstation.com. And again, you get to keep the content. They only ask for a piece of distribution. Can't beat that with a stick. But as for myself, guys, you can find me Black_Spartan615 on all the socials. I'm friendly, just don't make it weird. That's the only rule I have as far as being on socials. That, of course, we can talk about current events, we can talk about politics, we can talk about how you can be effective in your community. But again, keep it simple, don't be weird. I don't want to have to get this whole thing of blocking and whatnot. So again, don't be weird. Black_Spartan615 is where you can find me. Add me, follow me. I certainly appreciate that. The link at the bottom, I'll make that a little bit bigger for you guys to see. If you copy and paste that link in your browser, take you to my YouTube, Facebook groups for all of my podcasts to where you can like, share, subscribe. A like, a share, and a follow costs nothing, guys, but it means everything. I would certainly appreciate that if you can do just that. Aside from that, guys, again, still going to say, if you're in the Washington, D.C. area or you're heading to the Washington, D.C. area, definitely check out BlurredCon. Let the folks know there. Definitely enjoy it because, again, these experiences need to grow in number, not just at BlurredCon, but other cons as well. So hopefully, if you are able to go there and enjoy yourself, please do. You'll have a lot of fun. That being said, guys, I did check. We are 118 days away from Election Day, which means know who you're voting for. Please vote. Please get active because, again, if voting wasn't important, they wouldn't be trying so hard to basically make it harder for you to vote. And again, learn, because outside the national election that's happening, there may be other elections going on in your city and state. Definitely get to know the candidates. Get to know who you're voting for because, trust me, unlike here in Tennessee, there's a lot of people regretting sending a lot of these idiots to our state legislature right now. So we'd like to avoid that problem in the future. Get to know the candidates, press them, get to know what they're thinking because they're going to make decisions that affect you. And also, if you believe that you can be a great public servant, there are websites out there that can actually show you how to run for office in your city and state, whether you want to be a representative, whether you want to be a senator, things of that nature. It'll definitely show you how you can do that to where you can get on the ballot and, again, be able to be a servant of the people. That being said, guys, the last thing I'll say about how the Frack We Got Here is all about staying informed. We are not trying to reinvent the wheel, guys. We are simply giving you all the information, allow you to make up your own mind, but we do provide a logical perspective that goes along with it. We do better as a society once we're informed. We're progressive. We move forward. We try to basically correct the mistakes we made in the past by making the right ones today, like electing our first Black woman to the Federal Board of Governors, electing our first Black woman to the Supreme Court, electing our first Black woman as a National Cybersecurity Director. All great things. When we don't learn from history, then we are doomed to repeat it. That's what we keep asking ourselves. Why does everything go up in our paychecks? Why are we electing different politicians but still the same old gang in Congress? And most importantly, how the Frack We Got Here. Thank you all for watching, guys. Please take care of yourselves and each other, and hopefully we'll get through this. Peace.